Good evening, everybody. This is Eddie with Tree Peakers Podcast. Looking like we're headed towards episode 6 in this very moment. Right now, sitting across from me is a buddy of mine that I can honestly say I have been friends with for over 20 years, which is quite a long time. Funny thing is, we never really talked about this subject much growing up. I don't believe that he is worried about his name being on this podcast. Is that correct?
No, I don't care. That's fine.
Okay, so everybody, this is Carlos.
What up, guys?
This is a good friend of mine. So tonight, what's really kind of cool about this is we're stepping outside of the New Mexico landscape and we're headed to Oregon. Now, Carlos grew up here in New Mexico, I believe, somewhat, right? Your family's from this area?
From Colorado originally. But
That's what I thought. Okay, I thought I might have had that wrong.
Time.
But pretty familiar with New Mexico over the last 2 decades or so, right?
Definitely.
Or you've lived about that much in this area?
Yeah, probably close to 25 years.
25 years. Okay, so, you know, I'm well over 3 decades myself in this area. But the cool thing about tonight is you have a really fun story that you just told me tonight about a scream you heard while you were out in Oregon, and you have details on kind of where this was. And I have me personally, I've never been to Oregon.
Okay.
I am from, family's all from Northern California. Tons of cool Bigfoot stories out in the Sierra Nevadas and whatnot. But for your first story, and then you have another one about a camper that you heard about that was out there.
Right.
But first take me to where you were at some hot springs.
Yeah, so this is like October of 2013.
Okay, so we're talking 10 years ago.
Yeah, this is my second time I had lived in Oregon.
And you remember this vividly?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you told me earlier this is what sparked your, you even went searching to see.
This sparked my interest in starting to...
in the subject?
Yeah, starting to research screams and stuff in the
what
the
that scream could have been.
Right.
Because it sounded out of the ordinary.
And then I came across all these encounters with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them.
In the same, now when you did that, obviously you're going to pick up, when you're looking for a howl or a scream, you're going to come across Bigfoot stories. Right. But did you come across stuff that was in your neck of the woods while you were out in Portland?
In the moment when this happened, I would honestly say Bigfoot or Sasquatch was the furthest thing from my mind. I was thinking maybe a wild animal or even
amazing.
A person.
That's perfect.
Right?
Oh, you did tell me that you thought maybe that's a person, but it was a long, drawn-out scream?
It was distant. It didn't sound close.
Okay.
All right.
Then it had some legs on it if you heard it from way out.
It sounded very huge and powerful, almost like a T-Rex scream on the movie Jurassic Park.
Damn, that's crazy. That's not the first time that I've heard that.
But it was far away.
Okay. So if this thing would have been
if I had to guess, I'd say at least 10 to 20 miles away. But I was able to hear it like it was carrying through the mountains, So this place I was at, it's Bagby Hot Springs. It's east of Salem in Oregon. Okay. And it's about a 2-hour drive from Portland.
And that's where you lived, was Portland?
Yeah, I was living in Portland.
So you had to go pretty much off the beaten path. You're not in the city.
Oh, no, this is out in the middle of Mount Hood National Forest.
Oh, my God, you're out in Mount Hood.
Yeah, and... So
that's pretty cool.
Drive out there. There's a bunch of windy roads to get out there to the trailhead, and there's a parking area. You pay $5 to go in, and it's about a 1.8 mile hike up to the hot springs. Super cool place.
1.8 miles. So you're on a little trek.
Yeah, and you do gain some elevation. So I was and then you go out there and soak and get super relaxed, and you're on your way back to the car. I was probably about it was less than a quarter mile. It was probably about a football field. Back to the parking lot, right? So it was starting to get dark.
Oh my God, you heard this as the sun was setting?
Yeah, and I'm by myself. This is the first time I'd gone out there.
So you're by yourself, and the last thing you're expecting to hear is a scream that's out of the ordinary. It's different than anything you've ever heard.
Right, and I feel like it came from my left-hand side, and it was loud enough to where I was tired. I was getting excited to get back to the car, but also dreading the drive back home because right when I was about to get back to Portland was when I would always get tired.
Right.
And
especially after soaking in the hot springs all day. Yeah.
When I heard that huge scream like that, it stopped me in my boots. I just froze for a second, and I was like, "That was weird." And I was like, "It's nothing. Maybe it's a mountain lion," which kind of freaked me out.
You mentioned that to me earlier. You thought it could be a mountain lion.
Maybe it's a human, and when I thought that, it kind of scared me even more because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I had seen other hikers, not too long ago, maybe 10 minutes before, they had walked past me, and they were headed back. They were headed out there in the evening because it's open all night long.
Oh, really? That's
People
cool.
bring candles out there and stay out there.
Well, you know
and
what's
jam
funny
music
though?
party.
Like real fast, I don't think a human being 10 miles away would have the lung capacity.
No, that's exactly what I thought.
And
too.
at the same time,
well, I was like, if it is somebody out here screaming, that's even kind of more scary to me in a way, you know, because why would some man be out here screaming like that?
Well, the funny thing, you say that, right? Like, and the more you get into the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch topic, the more you hear about the yelling, the screaming, the long drawn out, like I'm going to butcher it right now, but you know, I do this for the listeners, just the way Arian, or pardon me, just the way one of my buddies did, and damn it, he wanted to remain anonymous. Anonymous, but guess what? There's no last name. I apologize, buddy, if you're listening. I didn't mean to say your first name. That's on me. But the way he imitated what he heard, I don't even have to say what he heard, but so we can keep it at that. But like this long drawn out howl, was it something like how like when you hear it, it's like, because I've heard recordings of it where it's like this. I can't do the scream. You said it was like a roar, right?
It was like a
right,
more high pitched than that. I'd say.
So it had like a tail end, like high pitched scream,
right,
but like deep and like
yeah, it was,
right. I've heard some of those on an audio recording.
Big animal, and I was like, whoa, that was creepy. So I stopped for maybe 5 to 10 seconds because I was trying to listen to see if I could hear it again.
Yep.
And it was the weirdest thing too, because in that moment when I stopped, like I was listening for that distant sound, that distant scream to come back, and it's almost like I heard rustling behind me. Maybe, I don't know. I was in my own head at that time and like psyching myself out, but I almost felt like I heard a little bit of a grunt as well, like a real quick, like almost like a dog, possibly. But it freaked me out, and at that point, like I knew I was close to the car, and I started hauling ass to get to my car. I jumped in my car and peeled out of the parking lot.
Really?
I thought about it the whole way home. I'm like,
okay,
that
so
was creepy.
100%. Like with all these encounters that I come across, when people, like what I experienced in the Bistai Badlands at night, you know that it's something different than what you're used to hearing, or like when you're like, I guess your spidey senses or your sixth sense is telling you to get the fuck out of Dodge. Mm-hmm. And like, right, like you know that it's there's a heightened sense of like your fight or flight response kicks in, right?
Is way up.
Yes.
Adrenaline starts going, and then you start trying to like rationalize, like maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but it's definitely something I never heard before.
That's when I think people in the moment, it's funny because you don't, like you said, you started researching what happened to me in the Badlands.
Right.
I didn't find out until 20 years later what I thought. I'm pretty like 99.9% sure that it was a Bigfoot encounter. But in the moment, I had no fucking clue what was going on. You know what I mean? I thought somebody was out there messing with us. I always would describe, early on when I would tell the story, I would say it didn't sound like an animal growling. It sounded like a human trying to imitate an animal. You know? Right. But now that I'm more familiar with it, like I call them like prehistoric man, like prehistoric humans, or just something that is, it's not an ape. If it's a mix of the two, okay, but there's some kind of human component to them, or else they wouldn't be smart enough to evade capture or to evade us for all these years. You know what I'm saying? Like,
for sure. Like
you have all these stories about them, but no one's ever captured one, and you know, science will never, give it its due until.
Well, my favorite theory is that they're interdimensional beings.
Oh, bro! I mean, that's. I mean, once you get going into it, and you learn about the cloaking, and you learn about them. The footprints, you know, will be going for a mile straight, and then all of a sudden it just stops and is gone, as if they were plucked out of the sky, or they walked into a. What am I even saying? When you say interdimensional portals, you know, I'm on board with you, but what do we even know about that? You know, if at the higher echelons of society and science, they know about these things, they're not telling us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If there is some kind of super wave technology that is above and beyond what's in our hand or our pockets, like cell phones and all that, and I wouldn't put them past it to have something like that, but I have even come across stories on Sasquatch Chronicles and on the Facts by How to Hunt podcast with Steve, where people write into him. Mm-hmm. Some people have wrote in anonymous to Steve, or have talked to the cat from Sasquatch Chronicles anonymously, not giving their name, but retired military, retired like higher level black budget military officers, you know, whatever it is they're doing. And they've said that they have tried to capture or kill these things to figure out how to make a super soldier, how to take those, get into their cellular, DNA and figure out what it is that makes them cloak, what it is that makes them, be able to trek up an incline that you or I couldn't walk up in an hour, but they're up in 10 to 15 seconds.
Supernatural abilities.
Dude. And does that just come from evolution for them? Or is there stuff like running theory that like maybe they were genetically engineered, one of the chimeras early on that were, where they were mixing whatever arrived on this planet eons ago and was mixing, different DNAs from what we had here to try to make worker bees to mine gold and all. But that's getting into ancient astronaut theory.
Right.
So is that plausible? Maybe. I don't know. I like to think it is, but none of this is you don't have necessarily concrete evidence on any of this stuff. But I believe that stories such as you're telling me right now, and all the stories we heard tonight from people sharing with us before we got together to do this, like that's evidence enough,
Totally.
Like,
that's the thing that compelled me the most too, is like I went down this rabbit hole. I think like 6 months later I met my ex-girlfriend who I lived out there with for 6 years, and she would probably tell you I became a little bit obsessed with all this, but
I think I
started
am myself.
researching the stuff, and like what really compelled me to believe in it is that like there's just so many people with so many accounts and like
so many similarities.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me because the more I talked about it, the more I was able to get people to open up about it, and
Same here.
It just really struck me as odd, the similarities and the amount of encounters and like the same. These are like level-headed people that I actually believe, and I can hear it in their voice when I actually talk to them and I hear them tell the stories, and it's just
100%. We're not talking to quacks.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like I told my sister Raquel today when she had texted me about the new episode 5, and how much they enjoyed it, her and Angel, and I said, the coolest thing about this is I'm not coercing people to talk to me.
Exactly.
I'm not coaching them and telling them, hey, say this for me. Here's our notes. Let's go over. Like me and you are just spitballing here, right? And I know I want to do round 2 with you because I think that there's like a lot more we could do. I know we're getting close to being done with where we're at. If people only knew how spontaneous this podcast really is and what it takes to get it done. But
well, you wanted me to tell the
yes,
story
I
about
want
the
you to tell me about Frog Lake
so
out of
it's-
Oregon
yeah.
before we have to stop tonight. So this one, everybody, might be a little bit shorter, but I promise you I'm going to bring Carlos back, and we're going to do the deep dive on Oregon and even maybe some more cool stories that he's come across that I don't know anything about. But right now, I wanted to hit 2 stories tonight. The first one was the Scream, we'll call it, right?
Yeah, out by
the
Bagby.
Scream at the Hot Springs.
Bagby Hot Springs.
Bagby Hot Springs. And now we're going to talk about a camper or hiker's encounter at Frog Lake.
Okay, so at the bar I worked at up in Oregon, I started talking about this stuff while I was drinking after work one night with some of my friends, and we had a regular there, and we'll call him Jake. That's not his name, but he was telling me, he overheard me talking about the area I was in, and this Frog Lake there's a bunch of lakes out there in Mount Hood National Forest, and they're not too far from where Bagby Hot Springs is. And we had gone out and camped out there actually one time. It was actually one of our last options, and it was kind of slow compared to the other campgrounds around the area. Timothy Lake was full, Clear Lake was full, and I didn't have much hope going over to Frog Lake, but it was actually pretty empty, and it was like late September, and this was like.
So you went and checked this place out after you heard the story?
Yeah, we went out there and camped after I heard this story. But so this guy, he was telling me that he was out there camping by himself, and he was north of Frog Lake, in the middle of the forest, and he was sleeping in a hammock. And he said he was starting to doze off, and all of a sudden he heard something big come barreling down the hill. And
like
it was
footsteps?
Footsteps, and he could tell that it was something on 2 feet. Like it wasn't galloping, it wasn't a horse or an elk or a cow or anything like that.
So he heard like...
He heard big heavy footsteps
and
running
he's
down.
sleeping in a hammock?
He's sleeping in a hammock.
This is nighttime.
Pitch black.
Okay.
So he says he hears it, and it's freaking him out, and it's coming closer to where he's at. And as it's getting closer to him, he made the mistake of, he says, I made the mistake of turning my flashlight on to try to see what it was.
Right.
As soon as he turned his flashlight on, there was nothing there in the direction where he thought he was hearing it come from. Maybe it was cloaking. Maybe it stopped or was hiding. I don't know. But
So the footsteps
stopped, and when he turned on as soon as they stopped and he had the flashlight on, he says that the entire forest went completely silent. Like even the wind stopped, the birds stopped chirping. It's just complete silence. And he said that's what freaked him out the worst.
Oh, right. So that's when all the hair on his neck and body stood up and like something like his sixth sense kicked in, like we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, and he said he felt like a sitting duck just sitting there in the middle of nowhere.
Come on, walk with me. Walk with me. We got to get up. We're right at the end of this first little session, but we can keep talking as we get out of here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's
can
not
you
much
give me
more
a
to
ride?
the story. Yeah, I can give you a ride.
Cool.
There's not much more to the story. He just said that he couldn't get a wink of sleep after that. His adrenaline was through the roof, and as soon as the sun started to peek over the mountain, he packed his shit up and took off.
So he was out there hiking, it scared the shit out of him so bad he hit the road jack.
Yeah, he was waiting for that first daybreak so he could just get up and get out, because like he was freaked out about what he heard and wasn't able to see what it was, but he assumes it was a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And
right, because if it was a bear, I'm sure it would have just kept going and mauled him if it was looking for him, right?
True.
All right, listen, I'm going to grab my jacket. We're out of here. Thanks for talking with me, Carlos, and we will pick up on round 2 as soon as we can.